My name is Kayci Visalli, and I'm really nobody of consequence. I'm just the average person you'd see in the supermarket, walking down the street. Um, but you wouldn't know our story. And our story is very unique, where my oldest son died of a heroin overdose 24 hours after he was released from a county jail in a hotel room, all by himself, nobody there to save him. And his sister, my daughter, is 6 years clean. She was 19 when she was diagnosed with end-stage liver disease, a whole gamut of other medical issues. All suffice it to say that she was given 6 to 9 months to live. When hospice was called in, she was hooked up to an oxygen machine, hospital bed, hospital table, the nice hospice nurses, and lots of liquid morphine to ease the 6 months end of life passing on. And after about 3 or 4 months into it, the nurse says, "Do you notice that she seems to be improving physically, but she's requiring more pain medication?" So they made the determination that Heather was indeed addicted then at the age of 20. And hospice came and they took the hospital bed and the hospital table and the oxygen machine, and they left the addiction. And one morning went into the room and Heather was gone. And she hit the streets looking for anything that could replace morphine and fentanyl. And she found her new best friend, and that was heroin. And that's when it all really began. Missing. There were weeks, months. I didn't know where she was. I didn't know if she was alive. The prognosis was still that she could die at any minute. If the varices burst in her esophagus, they said she'd bleed out in less than 3 minutes, and there would be nothing we could do. So I didn't know if she was lying in a ditch somewhere, or I didn't know. And I woke up every morning and went to bed every night not knowing where she was, if she wasn't, not to mention just the drug use. Through the next year and a half, 2 years, she would waft back into the family, steal some medications, steal an occasional vehicle while we were gone. We did come home one day. She and her boyfriend had broken into the house, busted through the back door, and stole her younger brother's bank where he'd been saving a couple $100. And she took a charge card and they went on a shopping spree, and then purchased more drugs and more drugs. And she still had the medical complications and ended up hospitalized a lot in New York at specialty hospitals. And they'd call me, and she would call me, "Mom, it's bad, you need to come, I need you." And so she would stop at nothing to use all the nice voices and knowing the right things to say to elicit a response from me, which now I know is the manipulation. She wanted that connection because she might need something, a ride, money, anything. So we'd go to the hospital and spend some time with her, and many things happened medically, but one thing was she would never have children. There was just no way that would be something she would live the rest of her life without. And she seemed to be very disappointed about that, which I was surprised in the middle of the addiction. It was the next summer. I looked at her and I thought, she looks a little bit more swollen than normal from the water buildup from the liver disease, and it's called ascites. And we went to the doctor and they didn't mention anything about it. And I said, Heather, I want to do a pregnancy test. She said, no. And I said, yes, let's do it. So in less than an hour, we found out she was pregnant, and 1 month later she gave birth to a 3-pound baby boy who born with neonatal abstinence syndrome, which is born addicted. And he stayed in NICU for up to 6 weeks. Didn't want to eat, didn't sleep, couldn't touch him. The nerve endings were still, I don't know if they were exposed, how it was, but they wouldn't let us touch him. The high-pitched squeal. And, our other children were in high school, and we were looking forward to vacation without children and living a life together as a family. So I knew what was coming, that they were going to ask if we would take the child. And Child Protective Services in New York did contact us. Heather's prognosis continued to be she will die any day if she even survives what's left after the childbirth. And I couldn't let him go and not know where he was, knowing that could be the last piece of Heather that I'd ever have. So we agreed. I quit my job, and we raised our grandson. He was about 3 and a half, and Heather had finally struggled enough to get clean that when she had her second child, she was not born addicted. She was beautiful, she was healthy, and at about 6 months of age, Heather made a few poor choices and ended up in jail. And again, CPS, will you take her for the weekend? All right, just for the weekend. Isaiah was born with many sensory issues. He required lots of care. He wasn't communicating, he wasn't walking. It was difficult. He wasn't sleeping through the night. I can probably easily say that he slept through the night less than 20 times, and he's now 10 and a half. So it's still a battle, but I thought I can take Madison for a weekend. And then they lengthened her visit. And so she stayed in jail a little bit longer. And I said, all right, 1 week longer. And long story short, we've had her 6.5 years now. And we have full custody. So we're raising 2 grandchildren. Heather's been 6 years clean. The real point of her recovery started when her older brother saw her shooting up in his bathroom. And he had a very young son, and he was absolutely furious, and he called me, Mom, what do I do? I said, Brian, you've got to call the police. You've got to turn her in. But Mom, she's my sister. I said, you've got to do this. She's got to get help. It's got to be somebody other than me. So he did, and she was arrested for having drug paraphernalia. And that was the beginning of her long journey to sobriety. She was in and out of rehabs for, I would say 15 to 17 different times. And every time I would think that was the last. And when she'd go into the next one, I'd think, oh, here we go again. But it finally came. It finally stuck. And in her pouring everything into getting clean, somehow Ryan seemed to find every excuse to fall into using. I don't know why. I can't even tell you when. At some point, he was off the deep end, and none of us could reach him. He denied it. The first time I realized that Ryan had a problem, I got a telephone call late one evening from my 4-year-old grandson. And he said, Nani, I'm thirsty, but I can't reach the milk. I said, Ethan, where's your dad? And he said, he's sleeping on the sofa. Can you wake him up? No, I can't get him awake. So my husband and I dashed over there 10, 11 o'clock at night, and Ryan was passed out cold on the sofa. And there was Ethan playing with his cars, sitting in front of his dad. And there was the milk in the fridge. And I knew then there was an empty pill bottle. I don't know what Ryan had taken. He claimed it was cold medicine. He didn't wake up until the next morning. I don't know how many times Ethan was left alone. And Ethan's mom did not use. She was clean. But Ethan and his dad were very, very close. So they spent a lot of time together. But when something stepped in and separated Ryan from his relationship with his son, I knew it was serious. And it was from that point on that I had to keep a constant watch. And it was at that point I knew something was starting. Ryan was very close with his nieces and nephews and played with them, and he would be the superhero, and he would put on the towel and run around the backyard and let them chase him and get on the floor and play cars and do all these things that they just adored, and they crawled all over him. And when he didn't want to do those things, when he fell asleep at Thanksgiving and at Christmas, I knew I lost him, and we had a new family member, and it was addiction. He told Heather and his younger brother Matt that it was bigger than him, and he knew that he would never stop. He would either continue to use until he died or unless he overdosed. He knew that he couldn't stop. He was very proud of himself that when he went into jail, that he had gotten clean. And then he'd come out and he'd go right back to it. And when I wanted to know how Ryan was or where Ryan was, I'd start to watch the news. And there would be a clip. Could you help us identify this man? And it seemed to always be my son. And I'd call the police, say, yes, this is my son. And I thought he would be shaken out of it when his girlfriend wasn't feeling good. And she begged him not to go to the store. And he said, no, I'm gonna go get soda. I'll be right back, you'll be fine. So he ran a bath, put her in it, said, I'll be back. Walked to the store, was back in less than 20 minutes. And she had shot up and just went to sleep, slid down into the water, and drowned. And he found her after it was much too late to save her. And of course, in New York, there's the law that anybody that provides the drug can be charged with murder or manslaughter. Miraculously, Ryan had no idea that she was using. There was nothing on his phone. There was nothing to tie him to it. I needed that. I needed that for my own peace of mind as a parent, that he wasn't involved. But he just, as time went on, he found somebody else. And out of jail 24 hours and made a purchase, and his girlfriend put him up in a hotel just about a mile from jail, and couldn't reach him the next day. And long story short, they found him comfortably lying down on the bed, his head in a pillow. Looked like he just went to sleep. Autopsy said that it was pure heroin. There was no fentanyl. And I remember the policeman standing at the door, and we walked back to the bedroom, and he said, are you Ryan Hurst's mom? And I said, yes. And I was thinking, really? What has he done 24 hours out of jail? And when he said, I don't know how to tell you this, there's no easy way, I knew. And my response was very inappropriate. It was just like, all right, thanks. Have a good day. Thank you for coming by. I appreciate it. It wasn't a surprise. I had been expecting that call regarding Ryan or Heather at that time for 14 years. Lived with it every day. It wasn't until, the shock of seeing him in that casket that I knew it was real. And to everybody else, the local news did a piece on it because it was not a contemporary obituary. I wanted everybody to know that it was heroin, that it was an overdose, and that he was not what everybody said he was, useless, worthless. He deserved to die. So there was some publicity. The world may have seen a junkie. I saw my 4-year-old in that casket. Any parent who has a child that's addicted, they don't see that child as that age. They still remember them as that cute 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, and they want to save that part of the child. Addiction is very crafty. It looks like our children. It sounds like our children. There's even times when the emotions that our children would have, it can mimic those and imitate them very well. They're very convincing to elicit some kind of response out of us as parents. And we think we've got a lifeline to our child. We're trying to help our child get out. The addiction will not let us ever get to our children. The child has to want to end that relationship. And I found when I advocated for getting clean with Ryan or Heather, it was sort of like in one of those arguments that the addiction would stroke them and say, can you believe your mom? She's accusing you of being addicted, that you have no control, that she called you worthless. No, I didn't call him worthless. No, but she made you feel worthless. you know, you have control over this. And it would be all more reason to go and use. And it wasn't until I backed out of the picture and loved my son from a distance until he decided to show up and made him start to argue with the addiction itself. And I can't explain it other than it was like this vicious love triangle. And when I stepped out of the triangle, then it was a relationship between my son or my daughter and the addiction. And the more they started having arguments between the two, where his need for relationship conflicted with the addiction not wanting to have a relationship, that's really what drove him to think about getting clean. And he probably went in rehab a couple times, but he also left a couple times. But that was always the driving force for Heather, was knowing that she had to choose between a relationship with her family or a relationship with a drug. And it took years, but she eventually missed us. And it drove her to get clean. If there's one thing I've determined not to be, is silent. Families aren't talking. It's hush hush. And if you try to open up, you get a response of someone saying, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I got to go back to work." So the conversation ends. But it's a lot of, I can't listen. I can't relate to this. And I guess that's the platform for I know. And creating a website where families can come and talk about addiction, can learn about addiction, and know that they're not going through this alone. Stigma is almost as silencing like a middle school bully, like addiction is to addicts. And just, it pounds families into the ground just to keep them quiet. And the stigma toward families, I would say, is almost as significant as it is against the addicts, because it has to be a dysfunctional family to create an addict like this. If they were a normal family, there's no way their child would be an addict. If they just prayed more, if there's all kinds of things they could do. There was stigma toward me as a parent from pharmacists, 8-year degrees behind their name, medical doctors. I sat in an ER with Heather, and she was unconscious, and he sat there nonchalant, said, "She'll never change. Your daughter will never change. She's an addict now. She'll die an addict." I asked to speak to him in the other room, and tried to put it in layman's terms. And I'd like to think that I made him understand. He left the room in tears, not so much of my badgering, but I just wanted to show him what it's like for his child if they were addicted. And I think he understood a little bit more. Stigma, the more we talk, the less it has to say. And I refuse to be silent. I don't care if people want to say I have a big mouth or I just want to tell my story. I'm not going to be quiet. There's somebody else that's going through this, that they need a lifeline. I can't promise that their child or their loved one will ever get clean, but I can promise them that they can get to a place where they're not living on the edge of being distraught. Parents need to face the reality. Death is real. And in today's world of fentanyl and pure heroin, any day could be our children's last. And if you don't prepare yourselves for that, you're preparing yourselves for a mental breakdown, and you might as well set your reservation up now. I advocate for parents to go talk to a funeral home. I advocate that parents talk to their children ahead of time. Say, what would you like at your funeral? If nothing else, that might be the shred that makes them think they've got to do something. There's a 50-50 chance that they won't walk out of addiction. But the other side is they might. So you can be prepared for the worst, but still hope for the best. But parents need to have a plan for both. And they're not responsible. It isn't their fault unless they are holding the needle, unless they purchase the drug. They're not responsible. No amount of guilt or shame, fear, we aren't responsible for our children's drug use. I tell my story, and I drew it through the website, and a lot of resource articles, and a chance for other families to tell their stories. The website is www.iknowaddiction.org. If I had any suggestion to give to parents, it would be find individuals that are suffering with the same issue of drug abuse, because family will not understand, friends, church family will not understand. Find a group that you can talk to in your local community, support groups, online, Facebook groups. You've got to keep talking. You've got to seek out people that are like-minded. Another suggestion is you've got to be prepared for the worst, but hope or plan also for the best outcome. One key thing that helped me, because loving my children, to me, I was loving them out of the addiction. That is not possible. That is the greatest lie that the addiction can make a parent believe. You cannot love your child out of an addiction. In many ways, I had to learn that I was enabling. Even though I wasn't trying to keep their habit going, I was trying to reach my child who was in there. I read a wonderful book, Boundaries, When to Say Yes and When to Say No, by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. And I would strongly recommend that book to anybody. My daughter said after I read that book, she knew I had changed, and it made her so angry. She kept trying to get a hold of the book so that she could shred it and flush it down the toilet. I kept buying them and kept a copy in my car and in the house and in every room I could, and started teaching classes. There is a fine line between love and enabling. And when your child shows up, Mom, can I have a place to stay? I'm cold, I'm hungry, I don't have any clean clothes. Letting your child stay for the night, giving them a meal, giving them a ride to the rescue mission the next morning is not enabling. We need to feed our children. We need to use common sense. But we need to know that we can't give them money for rent. It won't get paid. Money for food won't go for food, because everything they do, they live, they breathe, they eat. The addiction. I've talked a lot about I Know and the website. We had all of our children visit us for the first time in Indiana. We've been here a year. And so they all came and visited. Everything was great. And for some reason, I just was thinking a lot about the addiction and losing Ryan and him not being able to be part of the family, and just missing out. And I woke up one morning and I heard two words almost audibly, and they were, "I know." And in a matter of seconds, this thing just opened up. I've always loved to write and express issues in writing. And I knew at that point that the whole reason for I Know was to reach out to parents and to say, I know what you're going through. Because I thought, if people ever came to understand or recognize the I Know through the website or even a shirt, that in a store they could connect with, I know too. I knew that I had to create a place where I could write something of value that would mean something not only to me, but somebody else. It covers a lot of issues of stigma, what stigma situations we faced in our family, and how we worked through them, resource articles, articles on enabling. It's just, the website is to encourage people. We have to talk. We have to talk every day. We have to talk at the workplace. We have to talk at church. We have to talk at the supermarket. We have to share our story, even if people won't listen, because there will be somebody listening that will not share their story until they know that you're a safe person. And you're a safe person when they know that you understand their story. So that's really the whole foundation. I cannot be quiet. I cannot, if this is what I'm known for in my life, then let it be. But I can't be quiet. And because I don't happen to have an avenue to hundreds and thousands of people, the website is a great place to start. Facebook is a great place to start. And I am an advocate of speaking up, and hopefully that's what the website will encourage people to do, either there sharing their story or sharing their story in line with a cashier or a total stranger. To see a picture of a glimpse into what Heather is like now. She's 35. She has a third child, and she continues to have custody of him. He's entering kindergarten in a couple weeks. And she's doing quite well as a single mom. She is known on the streets as an addict that got clean, and she's an advocate for any addict on the street. She'll talk to them, she'll pray with them, she'll give them anything that they need. The highlight is her pastor asked her to come in one day. He had something he wanted to discuss with her. So she said, sure. He said, Heather, there's a business in town that's opening up a home for recovering women that have children that are recovering from heroin or opioid use. And we would like you to move in and to be the house mother, and you and your son to be there 24/7 for the women. You are an excellent role model. You are a perfect example of what can happen and what can be possible. And he said, we've looked for a very long time. He said, everyone that we've asked, they don't have the drive, they don't have the passion. And he said, this is what you're called to do. He said, you've got a magnetic personality. People are drawn to you. They're drawn to follow you. And she is very, very magnetic. She is still Heather with the tattoo of the hibiscus on her neck. Blue, pink, purple hair every other week. Her prognosis is still the same, they say, that she could bleed out at any time. Her spleen is still larger than her head, which is not supposed to be, from my understanding. Still end-stage liver disease. She's still being monitored. They said there'd be no way that she would live this long, and she has. And she's lived this long for a reason, and that's to help other addicts with her story. And she is truly a success story. I'm very proud of her for that. She did it the hard way, but she's clean.